The Lord be with you. And with your spirit. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, Lord. Jesus journeyed to a city called Nain, and the disciples and a large crowd accompanied him. As he drew near to a gate of the city, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, who herself was a widow. A large crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he was moved with pity for her and said, "Do not weep." He stepped forward and touched the coffin. At this, the bearers halted, and he said, "Young man, I tell you, arise." The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, exclaiming, "A great prophet has arisen in our midst, and God has visited his people." This report about him spread throughout the whole of Judea and in all the surrounding region. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
The reports of my demise have been greatly exaggerated. I presume you're a little bit grateful. Oh, thank you. We've been through a lot through the years of the retreats at Manresa. We didn't do it because really both of us were ill. There is a very contagious norovirus going around. It's not the flu, it's not COVID, but you get all the same symptoms, and it really, kind of drains you out. So very sadly, we had to cancel the retreat, and I'm sure there were people that were disappointed about that, especially those who had signed up for that retreat. But, as I think back, through the years, and I don't remember 15 or more years, we've had fires and floods, and the power's gone out, and we've never canceled the retreat. Even when the heat and the lights went off, people wanted to stay, so we did. But now we had to cancel because we were ill. So again, I really say that, and again, I know people don't always like it, and people have free will. They can do what they want. But please, for the betterment of the community, if only for my own health and yours, if we could refrain, if possible, from receiving on the tongue. I can never really say where this came from or how I got it, There was a funeral last week, and many people, several, received on the tongue. And again, the church allows us to do that. You can do that. But it's not very hygienic. We had a staff meeting last Tuesday, and one of the members of the staff was not feeling well, not blaming anybody. And then, I was never particularly close to that person physically, and there we have it. So again, I'm feeling better. One day or half the day you feel fine, the other half the day you're not sure what day it is. So thank you for your care and concern. So this is where we are. If we could be judicious and conscientious about our care for one another as to how we receive communion. All those who want to be bishops or deacons, please stand. We can kind of snicker. Oh, I know Debbie does.
Well, I've only been married once.
Do you have control over your children? We can kind of snicker at these things, but when our bishops and deacons don't act like that, then what happens? It makes a big difference. Now, if there's going to be a limitation to the reading, it's that we should all be like that as well as we can all the time, should we not? It is true, and I suppose by some necessity, priests, deacons, bishops, and popes and those sorts of people can and could or should be held to a higher standard, but why should it be a higher standard? I come from the same stock. We all come from the same stock as one another. I'm trying to be as holy as I can. I know sometimes you can wonder, But the point is that we build each other up. You know, from time to time, pretty regularly, particularly Paul, he's preaching the ideal. And sometimes we can get frustrated. It's like, well, who can do that? Well, in a certain frame, we can all do it. In another frame, we all have times we don't want to do it at all. So maybe it's just a good reminder. We're called to live holy lives, and I don't just mean devout. But as we're going to begin to learn in the early weeks of the book study this year, this season, that spirituality is really about human integration. That we accept the richness and the blessings and the goodness and quite literally the holiness of ourselves. But that can only happen if and when we accept the reality of our own weaknesses, wounds, our brokenness, and the sins that are inevitably going to be ours. And so that we work with the realization that God became incarnate because of our weakness. God, who was purely perfect, chose to be wounded and broken, dying in the person of Jesus, who took on and into himself our sin as if it were his own, so that we could be made whole. Holiness is a great challenge, and it's day by day, if not minute by minute. So we can thank God and St. Paul for these words today, that the church, as we celebrate the memorials of Cornelius and Cyprian, Cornelius was the pope only for a couple of years. He was elected pope in 251. In 253, he was martyred because he resisted the Novatian heresy, which I don't recall immediately what that was. And then his companion, Cyprian, was decapitated 5 years later. Cyprian was a bishop of Carthage, the first African bishop to be martyred. So we have that legacy in our church. And it's why cardinals of the church always wear red. Many of their vestments are red because they're called to give their lives and, if necessary, martyrdom for their love for the church and for the protection of God's people. So we're raised to that. You know, we're called to rise up to that kind of holiness in our lives and to bear with patience on those days, times, and hours when we're not so holy. Because our holiness does not depend on ourselves, it depends on God. It's freely given, and we can't ruin it because God's not taking it back. Sometimes we can smudge it up, right? But our holiness is the nature and the holiness of God in us through baptism and grace and virtue. We can see that really in this very touching reading today. Now again, put yourself in the scene. It sounds like it's a town or a place Jesus has never been. Maybe nobody in town even knows about Jesus. So he just walks up on a Tuesday morning, and you know, there's a 10 o'clock funeral in town, and he just happens to walk in there at 9:45, and they're carrying the guy down to the synagogue, or however they do the burial rites at that time. And Jesus is moved with compassion. And again, I'm not going to go through, the story. It's a pretty obvious story. Young man, widow. The woman has no one. Jesus realizes how vulnerable she is. She has no legal protection in society, and she is vulnerable and unto herself. He's moved with compassion, reaches out, touches the bier upon which the dead man is being carried. And I don't know if it says that he touched the man, but even touching the carriage upon which he was being carried, he made himself unclean. Well, that would have started, who is this? What's he doing? But he raises him. Now, it's an interesting, very little thing here. This is Luke's Gospel, and it's chapter 7. This is the first time in after chapter 2, the birth narratives, that Luke identifies, the extended narrative of the birth of Jesus. He identifies Jesus as Lord. But he says here in one of these verses, Instead of saying Jesus, he says the Lord. Why? Because Jesus not only has compassion, he has power to raise from the dead. And it's a sign and evidence that he has divine power. Now pay attention to the fact, because it's obvious, all of us can and could and should have compassion. And it should be active. It shouldn't be buried in our back pockets or left on our dressers when we leave home. All of us can and could and should have compassion. Not all of us can raise from the dead. Some of us can. You could raise from the dead. You could raise somebody from their loneliness or their depression or their fear. You can raise them up beyond their doubts and things that just weigh people down. You could do that. I can do that. We've done that how many times on these inner healing retreats? People find new lives. Isn't that raising them up? It is. But Jesus can literally raise from the dead. Most of us can't do that. I don't know that I can, but I could have desired it. But don't miss the compassion. Now, it must have been stupefying, really, right? So how young is a young man? 12, 13, 15, 18, 22? He wasn't 30. By the time you were 30 in that frame of history, you were like an old man. What did people think the next day? This man had to have been dead 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, maybe 10 hours. But if I recall, the Jewish rites, they always buried the dead on the same day. They don't wait for overnight. But he had to be dead several hours. There was no mistaking that he was dead. So what happened the next day, or 2 days later, or 3 weeks later, and they said, wow, and what happened? We know the guy was dead. We were about to put him in the ground, and here he is. He's back at his job, probably driving his mother crazy. Put yourself in the scene. Remember the power you have to have compassion. And all the other virtues identified in that first reading. They're in all of us. I haven't explicitly talked about it too much because it's just so present now. We're really in an age of evangelization, and only by necessity, right? And because of the tone sorry, we've heard the language, the absence of civility and courtesy and respect in our culture now. Look at the opportunities we have as Christians to show compassion, to be charitable, to simply be kind. It's still out there. We all want it. We all need it. You see it, but we could see more of it. You have the power of compassion. You have the grace to give people new life, even by a kind word, a little favor, or a great kindness. May we do so in the model and the example of Cornelius and Cyprian and all those who have preceded us, so that on that day when we're called to that heavenly glory, we can go in there with smiley faces, ready to say hello to all our family and friends already in glory.